Hey there, fetch is the newer way to make requests, so it is also going to seem familiar to those that have used XML HTTP requests like in the last lesson. But it provides a new API and it's more powerful and flexible because it's relying on promises. There's more information, of course, Mozilla Developer Network, so if you want to read up on that. And essentially there's some more options where you can set headers and requests, response, and there's a bunch of built-in methods as well that when you're returning that content, you can parse it out as JSON. So you can take the response as JSON and then utilize it. Because most of the time, let's be honest, most of these APIs are JSON and they're responding in JSON format. So let me show you how this works. And we're going to use that same URL that we used before. And in this case, we're also going to set up a button so that our JavaScript button is going to do something. So selecting that document using query selector, selecting the button element, or the element that is a button on the page, the first one, adding an event listener. So add event listener, and the event that we're listening for is a click. And whenever we are clicking, we're gonna get joke. So that's gonna be the function that's gonna run. So let's set that one up. So function, and this time we're gonna use fetch. And fetch is gonna be a lot cleaner than the xHR object. So we specify the URL that we're fetching, and this is promise-based. So once it retrieves the URL, we can use a function in order to get the response content back. And because this is going to be in a JSON format, we can then take that response content and return it back in an object format from JSON. And then adding in another promise. So we can chain as many promises as we want. So now the function, and we've got data coming in. And what we can do with that data for now, we'll output into the console so you can see that. So that's a very basic fetch. And whenever we click the button, you see we get a joke coming in and it's already within an object format. So this was going to make it really easy to update any of the content. So for instance, if we want to select our document and query selector, selecting that one div that we have on the page, we can update the text content. And in this case, we've got all of that object within data, and it's outputting it as value. So whenever we click the button, we're going to update, and we're going to have a new joke being presented within that div. And it's as easy as that. And it does look a lot cleaner. And of course, there's quite a bit more you can do with fetch as well. And both with xHR objects as well as fetch, you can retrieve multiple results if you want. So I'll show you another API where we can get back more than just the one result. This API is located random user me/API. And as you can see, at first we only get the one. These are randomly generated users and user information, but we can get more than one result. If we want 50 results, we can return back. Actually, this should be results. So if we wanted 50 results, we can return back 50 results within an array format. And that means that we can iterate through it with JavaScript and then output the contents in our visible area. So let's try that. So instead of get choke, it'll be get users and update some of this. We'll keep that input as before. Also, we can create an input to get any number of users that we want because this is one of the parameters in the API. So let's construct that element. So this is going to be our input element and document create element. So creating that input element. And then we're taking elements and we're setting an attribute to it. So this is going to be a regular text. So it gives us our input area. So we can get the value anytime we want and use that within the formula. So we've got the get users and we can update the URL. So this URL, let's add that, and we're going to use the URL, but we're going to set a temporary one. So let temp, and using the value of URL, add the parameters where we've got our regular URL and we want it to add in the results and make this dynamic. So using single quotes there, so we can do results 50. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to make this a dynamic number. So we're taking the element value and we're going to add it to there. So response is coming back as JSON, so that's fine, we can leave that. And it's coming in as data. So I'm going to comment this out for a second. And before we try that, let's just update this to be number because we are expecting a number. And then this isn't just URL, it's going to be temp so that we have that new parameter that's added in there. So starting out, and we get an array with different results, so 50 results there. And if we only want to see the results, we can do data results. So refresh. And we need to specify a number. Let's set a default there as well. So set attribute. And we'll set a default value, so I don't always have to keep adding it. And in this case, let's do 5. So whenever I click the button, we get 5 different ones, or if we want 50, we can get 50 results. So they all come back within an array format. So that means that we can loop through them and output the content as needed. So let's do that as well. Also, I wanted to select that element, that output element, and have it in within that output div so that we can make better use of it within the code. And as we loop through, so let's create our loop. So let x equal 0 and loop through while x is less than data results. We've got to include that results length. So the length of that array, and then increment x by 1. And then all the magic is going to happen in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to continue to add to the output element div. So just declare that, and that can be blank for now. And then we can add to it. So, and then getting the data results x. And then using that object, we can go to name first. And I'll output the data results object into the console so that we can see that as well. And this is really helpful when you do this so that you can actually see the object, and then you can break apart the object as needed. So to see within the console, we get all of that information. And I want to dig into the name and get the first name and last name. So adding in that's the first name, and then also adding the last name. So the HTML object now contains all the information that we need, and we can take output, and set the inner HTML of output to whatever the value of HTML is. And I'm going to just I'm going to add a line break here so that we can distinguish between them. So let's see what happens. And when we press the button, you see we always get 5 different results. And this is all coming from the API. So this is all dynamic. And then, of course, we can utilize any of this information that's contained within the response value. So that's how you can get multiple results. And if we want 50, we can get 50 as well. So do try this out. And coming up, we've got a challenge as well for this section.